I think we should talk to Nate.
Okay.
Let's talk to Nate, who's calling in from California. And we're getting you on live here. Nate, you are live on Talk Heathen. What's going on?
Great. How are you guys?
Doing good. Back in the studio.
Excellent,
It feels
excellent.
good. The lights are very hot on my face, just like old times.
Yeah.
It's great. Really awesome.
Yeah. Nice to know that you have a live audience for the first time in a couple of years.
Yep.
Yeah.
You said?
About 2 years.
A little over 2 years.
About 2 years, which is crazy. But here we are. So what's going on, Nate?
Great. Hey, quick. I was going to talk. I think I had broached this topic with Jim once. Jim, and I think it was probably Forrest with him on one of the other shows.
Okay.
And I kind of the answer that Jim provided in Forrest very eloquently back then was excellent. But when I thought about it, I thought I should come back.
Okay.
Because I thought I was not entirely satisfied. And the idea is that, if you guys, or anyone, if you guys know anybody, if one is an atheist about a theist God, right? That kind of makes sense, right? In some sense, it's a no-brainer because a theist God is, in theory, is one that intervenes, which means that there's a chance of some evidence to be made available to you, in which case you have no choice but to believe in a theist God. So long as there is no evidence, there is no reason to believe in one. Simple, right? That being said, if you move up to a deist God, right, then you cannot be an atheist whatsoever. You just cannot, because in theory, the deist God is one that flips the domino over, the first one over in some sense, and then backs off. So there is absolutely no chance of that God. That God doesn't intervene by definition in your day-to-day life, which means there isn't a chance at all of there ever being evidence of a deist God being there, right? That being said, if one asks you to bet on whether there is or isn't a deist God, right? I think you have no choice but to say, I'm exactly in the middle, right? I'm exactly 50-50. I'm not on either side of the scale. I cannot be, technically, because there's no chance of getting evidence for one.
No, well, so first of all, just because there are two options, right? Either there is a deist God or there is no deist God, doesn't mean that the odds are 50-50. Right? We can't calculate the odds because we don't know what they are. We don't know what the odds of a universe, how many universes can exist with a God and how many universes can exist without a God. So it's not exactly 50-50. But also on any question that is binary like that, a God exists or a God doesn't exist. Let's just back it up real quick. And I believe up over Dan's left shoulder, there is a jar of gumballs.
Jar of gumballs.
So that jar of gumballs either has a even number of gumballs or an odd number of gumballs, right? And so how many positions can you take on the content of the number of gumballs being even or odd on that question? How many positions can you take?
I don't know. So long as I don't count it, the answer is going to be I don't know.
Okay, well, I may not have made my question clear.
Isn't that fair?
So you could have a position of...
Okay, then restate your question if you got it wrong. Yeah. Sorry.
So one position you can take is you can accept as true that there are an odd number of gumballs. That's position one. Position two is you accept as true an even number of gumballs. Position three is I don't know. And position four is I don't care. Now, I don't care is purely me. So we'll just stick with the three that philosophers normally deal with. The correct position, until proven otherwise, is I don't know, right?
Exactly. That's
okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
So it's the same thing with the proposition of there is a deist God. Is if you don't have the evidence, then the correct answer is I don't know. Until you have evidence one way or the other.
Logical fallacy.
Pardon?
Yeah. No, you're right, Jim, but I think there's a very slight logical fallacy in the way you're explaining it. this analogy of gumballs, right? Gumballs, although they are over objectively Dan's shoulder where no one can see it, at this point, you have a chance of counting it. But in the case of the deist God,
well, right,
definition,
and that's what I just
deist
said,
God
right?
is never ever going to interfere in your life, right? Never ever, if he's there.
Right, but the
So
time to accept something
of measuring.
Right, but the time to accept something as true is when you have evidence. Because what's the difference between a God that never ever does anything for anybody and a God that doesn't exist? What's the difference?
Let's say it one more time, Jim. Sorry.
What's the difference between a God that never ever interferes, never ever does anything for anyone, and a God that doesn't exist?
None.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So I have no reason to believe that God exists until such time as I have evidence to do so. And if that God is not willing to provide evidence, that is not my problem.
No, I know it's not our problem. I'm talking about the logical thing here. Right? A deist God will not interfere in worldly affairs whatsoever. That's how a deist God is.
Right. And you're saying that I should accept that as true without evidence.
No, what I'm saying is you cannot accept it or not. You're right in the middle. You're saying, I just don't know. It's so pure, don't know. It's the purest form of I don't know.
Right.
Right in the middle. That's what I'm saying.
I think you guys are both agreeing on the same thing here.
The only thing you do is say, I don't know.
Yeah. But I think Jim's clarification was saying I don't know is not the same thing as saying it's 50-50, right? I think that was a big point of clarification that you made there.
It is not 50-50. You need to prove what the odds are, which means you need to know how many trials there are and then how many options there are per trial. Sure. And we just don't know that.
Sure. And there's also the idea of describing exactly what it even means for a God to exist, what that looks like, what is the God, what are its features. I mean, like, even people who say that they're, I mean, you know, the deists who try to call in and talk to us, who are Christians but want to try to make the deist argument, and I get that. Like, even then, you still don't really know what the deist God is. Like, I get that they're trying to close down the parameters a little bit and try to see what it is, but I still don't know. It seems like every single deist that calls in seems to believe in something a little bit different, right? And that's because I don't think there's a clear definition even on what we're talking about when we're saying there is a God, let alone one that exists but also doesn't at the same time because they're not here or they can't be observed or, you know, whatever, right? So anyway, Nate, I think we're basically on the same page there. You know, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a very slight nuance in how I thought of it and how Jim and yourself are thinking of it. But in general, the larger road leads to something. I think it does make sense what you guys are saying. And, you know, this thing has been bugging me. I mean, what I was thinking, am I thinking right or not, right? So, and I bounced this off a couple of friends. And then they all were, no one actually can come out with a satisfactory answer. And neither did you guys, to be honest, because I don't have the capacity of being able to reason as hard as you folks. But, I'm still thinking about this deist God situation. But in no way does it mean that I am a theist or a believer or anything like that. It's just a logical tussle that I'm kind of, dealing with.
Right. Well, remember, belief is a subset of knowledge, and there's such a thing as justified true belief. And you have a justified true belief or knowledge when you have evidence for what you believe. And so if you don't have the evidence, you should not believe it to be true until such time as it's been demonstrated to be true.
Yeah, I also think, when I was a Christian, and I think this is true for a lot of people who were Christians or maybe still are Christians or converts, you kind of go from a theist to a deist position at some point in that process. I think that's pretty common because you're almost making concessions for this idea of God. It's like, well, maybe we can't observe miracles. Maybe we can't observe like him around us, but maybe he's still out there and we just can't touch or feel or contact or do anything with him. And it's like you almost get into this God that kind of hides away into this untouchable corner so that you can still have that belief, but you put him in a spot where he just can't be verified. And if he just can't be verified, then as Jim is pointing out, there's just no reason to believe it than any other thing that can't be verified, right? We might as well be talking about teapots orbiting Jupiter or something, But anyway, Nate, I do appreciate your call. Thanks so much for giving us that conversation. And I hope we gave you something to think about here. And next time you see a jar of gumballs, don't count it. Just give a guess.
Right.
And that's 50-50, whether it's odd or even. I don't know if there's any other options outside of that.
No, that is a 50-50 shot.
What if it's zero, though?
Well, then it would not be a jar of gumballs. It would be an empty jar. A jar of gumballs implies that the...
Are we talking about the ontology of gumball jars?
I think
can we
we
still
are.
qualify it as... Anyway.